Hello everyone! Today we are going to have a practical lesson about how to set up a cupping. I know that all of us know how to do it in outline. However, I notice from time to time that there are some mistakes done during cupping sessions, and we really should avoid them because it can affect our results and we don't want it. That's why I decided to create this nice video on my YouTube channel. The first thing to start with is what is cupping. So cupping is a method of sensory analysis that is widely used in coffee industry. Initially, it was created to assess the quality of green beans, and that's why we need a consistent method to prepare our samples. So in a cupping, the influence of brewing parameters on a cup of coffee are minimized. What does it mean? It means that, like coffee to water ratio, brewing temperature, brewing time, like brewing device, all these parameters affect our final result in the cup, right? So we don't want these things, if some mistakes done during brewing, affect our cup, affect our flavors. Because in this case, we won't be able to assess the quality of roasted beans, the quality of green beans as well. So that's why cupping as a consistent and easily prepared method was created. Because we just need to, grind the coffee beans, put them in a cupping bowl and pour some water, set our timer, and that's it. This is very easy, this is very consistent. This is how we can assess the quality of our roasted or green beans. So cupping, from the one side, this is a brewing method, very simplified and consistent brewing method. From the other side, cupping is a method to assess the quality, the flavor characteristics of coffee samples. And we can use different kinds of protocols. We can use Q-cupping protocol, we can use a protocol for roasting competition, we can use a Cup of Excellence protocol as well, or a recently launched SCA evaluation system protocol. So we can have the same method and we can use different score sheets to assess our coffee. And of course, for each protocol, we have different standards, we have different procedures, which includes several steps to ensure that all the procedures, all the steps were done right, correct, and our assessment will be efficient and will be objective. Here I want to make one important comment for you. When you set up a cupping, I really encourage you to use a score sheet or at least a piece of paper to write down your comments, your notes, and your scores. Because when you do a cupping, when you set up a cupping and just use your experience, your memory, your personal impression about the coffee samples, in this case, the assessment will be very, very subjective. And when in the end, you do some decision, for example, about what coffee to purchase or what roasting profile to stick to keep for your further roasteries. Or, for example, if this particular batch coffee is okay for the further production. In all these cases, if you don't have a record, if you don't use any score sheet or protocol, and you're based on your personal appraisal, on your memory, you can do a wrong decision for your company because it's very subjective, right? So I really recommend each time when you do assessment to use a score sheet. Only in this case, we can do our job properly and not mess up. So the next step is to understand what the purpose of the cupping. So the purpose of the cupping, first thing, is to detect potential defects in tastes in green coffee or in roasted coffee. Second step is to detect some positive characteristics and their quality. Next, also very important step, is to measure the intensity of all these positive and negative characteristics. And the last and not the least, as I previously mentioned, is to record your results. I insist that this is a very important thing to do. But there is some cases when cupping, and in particular Q cupping, doesn't work very well. We always should keep in mind that cupping as a brewing method, it doesn't allow you to brew the perfect cup of coffee. We do it to assess the coffee quality, and we do it to see the potential of beans, these green beans or roasted beans, no matter. So, for example, when you come for a cupping in some green coffee company and green coffee supplier arranges a cupping for you, your task as a coffee roaster to cup and to check the quality, to assess the quality, and to see the potential if this coffee is good for espresso, or this coffee is good for filter, or maybe for cold brew. And as a coffee roaster, you should to understand like what roasting techniques, what profiles, and what the tricks to use to, increase the intensity, improve the complexity. So this is your job as a coffee roaster to understand how this particular coffee can be roasted better to get a better result in the end. Same thing for a barista. So you as a barista, as a head barista, when you brand newly coffee you never brewed before in your coffee shop, you can use a cupping as a starting point. So you can first to use a cupping to check the quality of the beans, to see the potential, and then to understand which brewing method, which coffee to water ratio, which temperature is better to use, to get the best cup of coffee out of these beans. Cupping doesn't allow you to brew the perfect cup of coffee. It means that, for example, using cupping for tastings for your final consumers, it's not very good idea. I think so for several reasons. Like first, because this is protocol that is used by experts. So me and you, we all know how to do it, but our guests, they probably don't know how to do it, and they will be confused how they're supposed to cup. They don't know the protocol, they don't know how to do evaluation. And again, cupping doesn't allow you to brew the perfect cup of coffee, so your guest won't have, this perfect experience. And what's the point in the end? And like the last thing here to mention, cupping not very hygienic thing, right? So I don't know, I think for me it's not very good idea to cup together with the people who not very know the protocol, and like these 20 people I see first time in my life. And all these things when people like lick the spoons, they don't rinse the spoons. At a certain point it really can be disgusting and not very hygienic, not very safe. So if you want to do a kind of tasting in your coffee shop, I really recommend to do like a batch brew, or to prepare a coffee in V60 and use thermopots, or I don't know, to use V60 as well and use bypass, to get some recipe with bypass, to to brew big volumes of coffee for all the guests who wants to taste your coffee. So another cases when using Q cupping is not very good idea. Quality control at your roasting facility. The next thing, to evaluate commercial coffee. And the third thing is for sourcing coffee. When you are in origin and you want to select some coffee, and Q cupping is not very good idea in these cases. Why, you may ask me? As you know, Q cupping, for cupping we need some time. We need at least 1.5 hours to set up, to make all the procedures, and to clean up. It's only 6 samples, right? So when you go to the origin, you need to assess, I don't know, like 50, 60, 70, up to 100 samples a day. And in this case, to make all this procedure, it's just, impossible. I know as a person who was an origin that, using Q cupping for sourcing, it just, it's not a good idea. It's like just impossible to do it. So the better idea here is just to take a piece of paper with the list of all samples you're going to try today, and just make some notes about the quality, about the intensity, keeping in mind the preferences of the coffee you want to select. For the roasting, I would recommend to use another kind of testing. For example, discrimination testing, like triangulation or difference from control, because when you do quality control at the roastery, you need to ensure that this particular coffee, this particular batch match your standard. So in this case, it's better to compare your coffee with the standard, with the reference. And Q-cupping is not very good for this, because Q-cupping serves for other purposes. The last thing about commercial coffee. So we all know that Q-cupping, SCA Q-cupping was created for specialty coffee, to assess specialty coffee. So it doesn't really work good for commercial coffee, because commercial coffee are usually not that complex. Again, spend so much time for all the steps, all the procedures, and just evaluate 6 samples. And in situation when you work with commercial coffee and you need to assess, 20-30 samples a day, it's not very convenient, and it doesn't have any sense, because in the end you will have same complexity cups, and spending all that time for just writing nutty, chocolatey coffee doesn't have any sense. So for commercial coffee, I really recommend you to develop your own score sheet, your own protocol that will allow you to make assessment easier and faster. So we have talked about what cupping is and what's the purposes of the cupping, and in what cases cupping doesn't work really well. And now it's time to discuss standards. So Specialty Coffee Association developed standards for each and every step, and they are pretty much detailed. We're not going to discuss all of them, but you can find all the standards on their official website. So today we just talk about the basic one, which we will need today to set up a cupping. So the first thing is coffee to water ratio. We should take 8.25 grams of coffee for 180 milliliters of water. For the cupping, we must use medium-sized ground coffee, and if we need to specify, 70 up to 75% of these grounds should go through the 20 mesh sieve. You can check it if you have this particular sieve. The next thing is water temperature. So when you pour coffee in the cupping bowl, the temperature may vary from 92.2 degrees Celsius to 94.4 degrees Celsius, or it's 200 plus minus 2 degrees for Fahrenheit. However, I really recommend you to have a higher setup temperature on your boiler or on your kettle, around 96 degrees Celsius, because of course water lose temperatures when you pour it in your kettle. Then when you pour it in a boil, you don't want it, you still lose the temperature. That's why it's better to set up a bit higher temperature on your equipment. So brewing time also may vary from 3 to 5 minutes. So you can actually choose any time from this range from 3 to 5 minutes, but once you choose this time, you should stick to this particular timing, because we cannot have different timing for different sessions, because it will affect our extraction, it will affect our taste, and in the end it will affect our cupping result. So the coffee will be different, not because the coffee beans is different, but because our extraction is different, and these particular cases we should avoid during a cupping. In case you need to assess the quality of green beans, we have a standard for roasting samples. So according to SCA standards, they determine the roasting time. So the samples should be roasted between like 8 up to 12 minutes. But of course, depending on what kind of equipment, what kind of sample roaster you use, this time may vary. And another standard for samples that it's better to assess them not earlier than in 8 hours after roasting, or not longer than after 24 hours after roasting. So the better idea is just to roast your samples a day before cupping. This is according to SCA standard. Regarding the quality of water, you can check the full standard here, and you should always remember to use medium hardness water with neutral pH, clean, odor and flavor-free water. What will we need for the cupping? The two most important pieces of equipment is a heater and a grinder. Another smaller stuff is of course some kettles, cupping bowls, spittoons, cupping spoons, glasses for rinsing cups, of course scales, timer, very important thing, some napkins, some coffee trays with the coffee, and of course SCA score sheet with clipboard and pencil. This is what we will need for a cupping. I wanted to discuss another thing here, why we should better to use heater and a kettle instead of using brewing kettles. So you should remember that we have 5 cups for each samples. One cupping bowl is around 200 milliliters, so 5 cupping bowls, it's a whole liter of water. And if we cup 6 samples, we need 6 liters of water, without considering the fact that we will also need water for rinsing spoons. So in this case, we really need a sufficient amount of water, and water heater like 10 liters and 20 liters is much more better than a brewing kettle. Another thing why I really recommend you to use this kind of kettles, not a brewing kettle, because of the spout. So you can see the difference in spouts. And of course, the design of their spout, this so-called gooseneck spout, was designed for controlling the jet, controlling the way how you can brew your coffee. But it's not very good for cupping. It's not good for cupping at all, because it's very important to have a jet with a good pressure to mix all the grinds, and not to make it slow and make it faster, because otherwise we are going to lose a temperature. We are going to extend our cupping time, and we really don't want it, because in this case we won't be able to do all the steps properly, all the evolution steps properly. That's why I really recommend you to avoid this kind of kettles and use just usual kettles. Really can buy them, I don't know, in Noon, Amazon, elsewhere. Or you also can use the thermopots as well, but not brewing kettles with a gooseneck spout. So the first step when we need to make is to weight the beans in cups. We use ceramic bowls, which are ideal for cupping. They hold temperature and they don't absorb aromas, unlike plastic. These cups have a volume of 200 mils, so we take 11.5 grams of coffee, taking into account that the grinder will leave half a gram inside. We weigh the whole beans and only then grind them, because this is the only way we can evaluate the uniformity of the coffee beans. I prefer use a spoon, so I don't have to touch the grains with my hands. The second step is to grind the samples. We may have different strategy for grinding coffee. We can use an extra cup where we remove the both and pour coffee from one cup through the grinder into another cup. Or you can keep the both and to do process using only one cup. An important point in the grinding process is to purge some beans from the sample before grinding it so the different samples do not mix in the cup. We are ready to assess the dry aroma. Before we start doing it, please don't forget to fill out information on your score sheet about the name, about the date, about the samples. We don't want to mess up in future. We finished with white whitening and grinding our samples. Everything is ready for assessing dry aroma of the coffee. And here I wanted to explain you the main principle. So cupping is supposed to be a brewing method that gives us consistency. That means that we should do everything consistent. We should keep the same order when we do all the actions. When we evaluate dry aroma, when we pour water, then when we break the crust, then when we, skim the foam, and all the rest and further evaluation procedures, we should follow the same order from the first to the second, from the second to the third, from the third to the fourth, from the fourth to the fifth cup. Same order, yes, and when we pour water, it's very important not to have any stops, because in this case, each time we face possibility to have a different extraction. If we have a different extraction, we're gonna have inconsistent results. We're gonna have ununiform cups, ununiform taste in our cups. And in this case, it will affect our scores, but it will affect our scores not because something wrong with the beans, but just because we didn't manage to do everything properly. So this kind of mistake we should avoid, because if it happens, we need to recap everything. We will need to redo all the procedure, start from the beginning, and we really don't want this. It's time to pour the water. Please don't forget to warm up kettles before pouring hot water for cupping into them. We set the timer and off we go. The jet should have good pressure so that the coffee is mixed well and no dry particles remain. And then don't forget to follow our rule. If you pour water consecutively into bowls, as I do now, you can't start breaking the crust simultaneously in each station. If you pour water simultaneously into each station, you should break the crust in the same way. And of course, if you start pouring from left to right, you can't start pouring from the other side or somewhere in the middle of the row unless you set a separate timer, because we need to ensure that brewing time for all the cups is exactly 4 minutes. After water is poured, we wait, and at the 4th minute, we start breaking the crusts. At this stage, we evaluate the aroma of brewed coffee. When we break the crust, volatile compounds are released, so it's the best chance to assess the wet aroma of the samples. We stick to the same order. The movement should be gentle to keep all the grinds inside the bowls, since extraction continues during the whole cupping, and again, we need to ensure it's consistent. Just run your spoon lightly along the rim inside of the bowl. The next step is to skim the foam in the cups. Rest the spoons inside and slide along the bowl's rims to scoop up and remove the foam. Follow the same order you poured water and broke the crusts. It's time to make an evaluation of the samples. It's up to you what score sheet to use at this stage, but please ensure you do everything in the right way. Also remember, when you make a cupping, assess the coffee, it's very important to rinse the spoon between cups to avoid coffee from one cup to get into another cup. Because if, for example, there is a defect in one cup, you can contaminate the next cup. And then again, the assessment will not be objective. Once you finished cupping and it's time to clean it up, I recommend using a sieve to keep the cape from getting into the drain system and clogging it. After the coffee drains, simply throw it in the trash. So this is it. We finished with our cupping today. I hope this video was helpful, and I hope it really helped to clarify all the nuances how to set up a cupping properly. I want to thank you, GMCC Coffee Center, for providing this beautiful venue, which is certified for Q classes and for CA classes. Please subscribe on my YouTube channel. See you soon. Bye-bye.